Let's continue on and look at the main concept behind Unity 3D. Unity can be quite confusing if you don't understand the main concepts. However, once I've explained these, you'll think that it's absolutely brilliant and you'll love this game engine as much as I do. Now, I've already said that everything in the hierarchy pane is all the game objects that are in the current scene. And game objects is basically where Unity starts. Once we start and open up a new, clean, empty project, we'll start by adding game objects from the game object menu. Now, you can create an empty game object basically that is a dot in 3D space that we can use to spark things from, or for example put in front of a barrel of a gun and make it shoot from there. But also there's other game objects, and let's go through these real quickly. A particle system is basically a particles engine in the game. So for example, particles can make fire or warp effects, or you can cast spells. Those are all created using particles in 3D space. Then next we have the cameras, and cameras are extremely powerful in Unity. You can set one camera to render one thing and then another camera to render another, and you can make as many cameras in your game as you like. There's no limit to the amount of cameras you can use in Unity. Then we have GUI texts, and these are actually graphical user interface text, for example, to make a main menu, or to make a slider, or to read text on the screen. Then a GUI texture is the same thing, but then it holds an image, for example your health or your lives. 3D text is the same as basically GUI text, but it floats around in 3D, so you can make your main menu in 3D space. Also an extremely powerful feature. Then we have three types of lights: point lights, spotlights, and directional lights. Directional lights are much like the sun. They just keep going and keep going, and you can only change its direction and color, but it will not quiet down after a while. Spotlights are one spot, and point lights are points in 3D space, and they will lit that certain point in the game, but of course after the radius is set off, then it will quiet down after that, which is quite the opposite of the directional light. Of course we can make some 3D objects as well, like cubes, spheres, capsules, cylinders, and a plane. And then last but not least we have a ragdoll, and a ragdoll is what happens when you shoot a character and he dies and his body turns into what is only controlled by physics. So for example, if you would pull his hand, the whole body would move as you pull him. That would be a ragdoll. So that is already a couple of game objects that you can use in Unity 3D, and all these are extremely powerful and flexible. Now as soon as you've made a game object in Unity 3D, you can attach components to them. Now for example, these bunkers that we were looking at are an imported 3D model into Unity 3D, and this is also a game object. So that is another way to include game objects into your current level. Components are attached to game objects, and components are outlined here in the inspector view underneath the transform. Every game object has a transform, and then all the other things that are beneath it are components. So as you can see right here, there is a script attached to this game object, and a script is also a component. Let's take a look at the other components that we can attach to game objects. There's meshes that we can use, and there's particles that we can use. More about this later. There's physics that we can put on, for example, a box to make it fall like a crate. There's audio that we can attach to game objects, for example, to make a gunshot sound. We have rendering components. We have miscellaneous components like an animation. We have scripts that we can attach, and of course we can make our own scripts, but Unity comes with a whole bunch of scripts that are already done for us to get us up and running very quickly, and these are extremely short and very powerful scripts. Then there's image effects that we can also use, and then camera control components that we can attach, and these are also scripts that can be attached to a camera. So those are game objects and components. Now of course I've already mentioned that you can import your own assets, and assets are basically also game objects, but Unity makes a difference between certain assets in the game. For example, a script is an asset that functions as a component on a game object. And there's a couple other assets that you can see here: materials, cube maps, lens flares, fonts, your own fonts, physical materials, and GUI skins. Now, more about this we'll learn over time as we start making our own first-person shooter throughout this series. So let's hurry up and go to the next section and start creating our first-person shooter, and within a couple minutes you will notice that we are already walking around, something that takes a very long time in any other engine. So let's move on.